So hello everyone and welcome to our first lecture of Docker course. So before installation of Docker, the first thing we have to be understand. So what is the difference between the containerization and the virtualization, and also we are going to learn how the Docker is work and how it's helpful for production grade. Okay, so all the things we are going to cover up. So let's get started ahead. So as you can see that on my screen, I have the two section, right? So the first one is in the right hand side we have the containerization option. In the left hand side we have the containerization option, and right side we have the virtualization. So what is the difference between the both one? So I will be cover up one by one and you can understand all the things. Okay. So let's get started ahead in the from the right hand side, that is the virtualization. Okay. So the first thing or the first base of you can see that it is the infrastructure. So what does the infrastructure mean? So let us take an example. So if you are running an Ubuntu machine, or if you have the Mac OS, or if you have the Windows machine, so what is the common in between the all the among of three OS? The base, the infrastructure is the common, like the RAM, the CPU, and the hard disks. Okay, so this is the main requirement. So this is the minimum requirement so of any operating system to be run. Okay, so this is the base if you want to run any operating system. Okay, then we have the hypervisor. So hypervisor is responsible for managing the virtual machine. So let's take an example. So let's suppose if you have any Windows machine and do you want to run the Ubuntu on it. So you have the two options, like the first one, you can just install the VirtualBox on your existing machine in the Windows machine, or either you have the second options, like you can just use the dual boot option on your Windows. So you can just able to switch into Windows to the Ubuntu. So from the last 3 or 4 years, I have been using the dual boot options, like I have the Windows also and I have the Ubuntu also in the same laptop. But the one thing you have to be remember, so while you are using the VirtualBox or the dual boot options is the same. So what will be happen? Your resources will be shared, which means, so if you are running more than one virtual machine on your system, and let's suppose if you don't have a high configuration machine like the 16 GB of RAM, like the 8 cores of CPU, and it's not going to be perform faster. So this is the main problem of virtual machine. So it is a resource hungry. So how containerization is different than the virtual machine? So let's move on the next section, that is the containerization. So as you can see that we have the same base, that is the infrastructure. So as I mentioned earlier, so we have the minimum requirement of infrastructure. So on the top of that we install the operating system. Okay, and as you can see that in the above of the infrastructure we have the host operating system. So what does mean? So host operating system, it can be your Mac OS, Ubuntu, or the Windows, or any other. So how the Docker is work? So you have the base infrastructure, then we have the install on the operating system, like the host operating system as per your need, like the Mac OS, the Ubuntu, Windows as per your need. Then on the top of the your host operating system, the Docker will be installed. So we don't have to be installed like in virtual machine. So it can be installed on your host operating system. Okay. Then we have the containers application, and we can see that we have the app A, B, C, D, and much more. So from the couple of minutes, we are just discussing on the containerization. So what does actually containerization mean? Let's suppose you have the 1 liter of water, and you want to store that water in the bottle. So you have the two options, like either you can store in the 1 liter of bottle. Okay, that is the single one. So either you have the second options, like you have the 5 bottles of 200 ml, which can be same quantity like the 1 liter. So what we can do, we can equally distribute the water to the each bottle like the 200 ml. So we have the quantity that is the same, that is the 1 liter. So what we have done, we have the equally distribute that water to the each bottle. So that is the containerization. So using the Docker, you can just separate out all your services into the Docker container. So we are going to move forward ahead and also understand what is the monolith architecture and the microservice architecture and how the Docker is helpful there. So both the topic we are going to discuss in the next lecture. So before that, let's complete the last section of the video. So let's understand how the Docker is work. So once you install the Docker on your system, so we have the 3 stages, like the client, the Docker host, and the registry. Okay. So Docker client have the 3 commands, like the Docker build, pull, and run. So we have the multiple as well, but we are just going to discuss on the 3 mainly. Okay. So how just you can just run the images. So we have the Docker build command, or let's suppose we have the Docker pull command. So once you type the Docker pull command, so what will happen? So it can send request to the Docker daemon. Okay. And it can be able, or this is the responsible for pulling the images from the Docker registry. So we have the images that of any famous applications like the Nginx, the Ubuntu, or either we can create our own images as well on push on the Docker registry. It can be pull the image So Docker daemon will be pull the image from the Docker registry. So Docker daemon is responsible for pulling image and store in our system. Okay, so let's suppose if you have pulled the Ubuntu image from the Docker registry using the Docker pull command. So after that you have run the Docker run command. So what will happen? So Docker daemon is now going to run this image in the containers, and the Docker daemon is responsible for running like the pulling the images and the running in the containers. So this is the main architecture of how the Docker is work. So you don't have to worry on this thing too much. So you can be able to understand in the further videos. So let's move on the next lecture and understand what is the difference between the microservice architecture and the monolith architecture, and how Docker is helpful in the microservice architecture.